The first time anyone laid eyes on Marcus Holloway's cabin, they laughed. Not a polite chuckle behind closed doors, but loud, mocking laughter that echoed across the valley of Pine Ridge, Montana. The roof sat at such a steep angle that it looked like the entire structure was leaning forward, ready to tumble down the mountainside at any moment. Neighbors would drive by slowly, roll down their windows and shake their heads. Some took pictures. Others made jokes at the local diner about the crazy engineer who didn't know how to build a proper home. Marcus was used to it. At 42 years old, with graying temples and hands calloused from years of construction work, he had learned that innovation rarely came without ridicule. He had moved to Pine Ridge 3 years ago after his wife Sarah passed away from cancer, leaving behind their cramped apartment in Seattle and a job that sucked the life out of him. The mountains called to him, the silence, the space to breathe, the chance to build something with his own hands that would last. He bought 12 acres of forest land on the northern slope, where winter storms hit hardest and snow piled deeper than anywhere else in the county. The real estate agent warned him. The local contractors warned him. Even the guy at the hardware store warned him that this land had claimed 3 cabins in the past 20 years, all crushed under the weight of winter snow. But Marcus had a plan. Years ago, when he was still a structural engineer in the city, he had studied traditional Norwegian and Alpine architecture. He understood load distribution, pitch angles, and the physics of how snow behaves on different surfaces. While everyone in Pine Ridge built their cabins with standard pitched roofs, Marcus designed his with an extreme 55-degree angle, almost vertical on one side. The south-facing slope was gentle. The north side dropped like a ski jump. It looked absurd. It looked wrong. But Marcus knew better. His nearest neighbor, Bill Patterson, was the worst of them all. Bill owned the largest cabin development company in 3 counties and had built half the homes in Pine Ridge. He was a stocky man with a red face and a voice that carried across parking lots. Every time he saw Marcus, he had something to say. At the post office one October morning, Bill cornered him between the mail slots and the door. "You really gonna live in that thing when the snow comes, Marcus? Looks like a damn playground slide got stuck on your walls." Marcus just smiled and nodded. "Time will tell, Bill." Bill laughed, slapping his knee. "Time's gonna tell us we need to dig your frozen body out from under a collapsed roof is what time's gonna tell us. You should have hired a real builder instead of playing architect up there." The other folks in line chuckled. Marcus collected his mail and left without another word. The mockery continued through the fall. At the grocery store, at the gas station, even at church on the rare Sunday Marcus attended. People whispered. They pointed. A local blogger even wrote an article titled 10 Worst Building Decisions in Pine Ridge History, and Marcus's cabin made number 3. The photo showed his tilted roof against a bright blue sky, captioned with the words, "When engineers think they know better than nature." But Marcus kept working. He reinforced the beams. He installed heat cables along the eaves. He checked and rechecked every joint, every bolt, every angle. He knew what was coming. Montana winters were unforgiving, and this year the forecasts predicted record snowfall. By mid-November, the first snow arrived. Light dustings that melted within days. People relaxed. Maybe it would be a mild winter after all. But Marcus watched the weather patterns closely. He saw the jet stream shifting. He felt the temperature dropping faster than usual. The signs were all there. Thanksgiving week brought the first real storm. 14 inches overnight. Marcus woke to a world transformed into white silence. He stepped onto his porch and looked at his roof. The snow had already begun sliding off the steep north face, piling in a neat drift away from the foundation. The south side held a thin, manageable layer. Down in town, people were shoveling roofs, clearing heavy loads before the weight caused damage. Marcus sipped his coffee and watched nature do the work for him. Bill Patterson drove by that afternoon in his massive pickup truck. He stopped in the middle of the road, staring at Marcus's cabin. For a moment, Marcus thought he might actually say something decent. But Bill just shook his head, muttered something, and drove off. The real test was still coming, and Marcus knew it. December arrived with a vengeance that nobody expected. The National Weather Service issued warnings across western Montana. A massive storm system was moving down from Canada, bringing Arctic air and moisture from the Pacific. Meteorologists predicted anywhere from 3 to 6 feet of snow over a 10-day period. Pine Ridge hadn't seen anything like it in 40 years. Marcus prepared methodically. He stocked up on food, firewood, and batteries. He filled his generator with fuel and checked his propane tanks. He was ready to be snowed in for weeks if necessary. The town, however, went into panic mode. Hardware stores sold out of roof rakes and snow shovels within hours. Contractors were booked solid for emergency roof reinforcements. Bill Patterson's crew worked around the clock, charging premium rates to install support beams under sagging rooflines. The storm hit on December 8th. Snow fell so thick you couldn't see 20 feet in any direction. The wind howled through the valley like a wounded animal. Power lines snapped under the weight of ice. The temperature dropped to 15 below zero. For 3 days straight, it snowed without stopping. Marcus watched from his window as the white wall grew higher and higher around his cabin. His tilted roof performed exactly as designed. Every few hours, massive sheets of snow would release from the steep pitch with a thunderous whoosh, sliding clear of the structure and piling harmlessly in the designated drift area he had planned for. But down in town, things were falling apart. On the 4th day, when the storm finally paused, emergency services started getting calls. The community center roof had partially collapsed under the weight. Several homes reported severe structural damage. Bill Patterson's own showcase cabin, the one he had featured in Montana Living magazine just last spring, had buckled. The main support beam cracked right down the middle, and the entire second floor sagged inward. Nobody was laughing anymore. The local news sent a crew up as soon as the roads were passable. They interviewed families whose homes were damaged, businesses that were closed indefinitely, and contractors who were overwhelmed with emergency calls. The estimated damage across Pine Ridge exceeded $12 million. And then someone mentioned Marcus Holloway's cabin, the one with the crazy tilted roof that everyone mocked. A reporter and cameraman made the dangerous drive up the mountain road. When they arrived, they found Marcus outside, calmly splitting firewood. Behind him, his cabin stood completely intact, undamaged, not even a crack in the windows. The snow had cleared itself naturally from the steep roof, leaving the structure free and safe while everything around it suffered. The reporter approached with her microphone extended, her boots crunching in the deep snow. "Sir, can you tell us about your cabin? How did it survive when so many others failed?" Marcus leaned on his axe and looked at his home. "Physics and respect for nature," he said simply. "Nothing more complicated than that." The news segment aired that evening across Montana and went viral by morning. Marcus Holloway, the man who was mocked for months, became an overnight sensation. The video showed the stark contrast. His pristine cabin standing proud while the camera panned to damaged roofs throughout the valley. Comments flooded in from across the country. Engineers, architects, and builders dissected his design. Universities requested interviews for their engineering programs. But the real shift happened locally. Within 48 hours of the broadcast, Marcus's phone started ringing. It was Bill Patterson. "Marcus, I need to talk to you." Bill's voice had lost all its bluster. It sounded hollow, defeated. "My cabin is destroyed. Half my clients are threatening to sue me. Insurance won't cover it all because they're calling it an act of God. I've got 18 families with no place to live and winter isn't even half over." There was a long silence on the line. "I'm ruined, Marcus. 23 years building cabins in this valley and one storm took it all away." Bill's voice cracked. "I was wrong about you, dead wrong. And now I'm paying for my arrogance." Marcus stood at his window looking out at the mountains. He thought about Sarah, about how she always told him that being right wasn't worth being cruel. He thought about the community that had laughed at him but was now suffering. "What do you need, Bill?" Bill exhaled heavily. "Help. I need your design. I need to rebuild these homes properly before spring, and I don't know how. Everything I thought I knew about construction in this climate was wrong." Marcus closed his eyes. He could have said no. He could have let Bill figure it out himself, let him lose everything the way he deserved after months of public mockery. But that wasn't who Marcus was. Sarah wouldn't have wanted that. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring your crew leaders. I'll show you everything. If you're watching this and thinking about how easy it is to mock what we don't understand, take a moment and subscribe to the channel. Because this story is about to show you what real character looks like when the tables turn. The next morning, 6 trucks pulled up to Marcus's cabin. Bill Patterson stepped out first, followed by a dozen contractors, all looking humbled and desperate. They gathered in Marcus's workshop, a small heated shed behind the main house, where blueprints and structural calculations covered every wall. Marcus spent 4 hours explaining the physics behind his design, the angle calculations, the load distribution principles, the way traditional Norwegian architecture had solved these problems centuries ago. He showed them thermal imaging data, stress test results, and computer simulations he had run before ever driving the first nail. The contractors took notes like students in a graduate seminar. Bill stood in the back, arms crossed, watching Marcus explain concepts he had dismissed as nonsense just weeks earlier. When Marcus finished, the room fell silent. One of the younger contractors, a kid named Tommy who couldn't have been more than 25, raised his hand. "Mr. Holloway, why are you helping us? After everything that was said about you, after Bill here led the charge making you look like a fool, why share any of this?" Marcus looked at Bill, then back at Tommy. "Because 16 families are sleeping in the community shelter right now. Because winter has 3 more months to go. Because being right doesn't keep people warm at night, but good construction does." Bill's jaw tightened. His face reddened, but not from anger this time. From shame. Over the next 6 weeks, Pine Ridge transformed. Marcus didn't just share his blueprints, he worked alongside Bill's crews. Every morning at sunrise, he was on site, teaching them how to calculate roof pitch for maximum snow shedding, how to reinforce load-bearing walls, how to position structures to work with the mountain weather instead of against it. The work was brutal. Temperatures stayed below zero most days. But slowly, systematically, homes began to rise from the wreckage. Each new roof had that distinctive steep pitch. Each structure incorporated Marcus's principles. Bill changed too. The arrogance evaporated. He listened now, asked questions, admitted when he didn't understand something. One frozen January morning, while they were installing support beams on the Henderson family cabin, Bill pulled Marcus aside. "I owe you an apology that's about 3 years overdue." Bill looked down at his boots. "I made your life miserable because your design challenged everything I thought I knew. Because it made me look stupid. I was threatened by you and I handled it like a child." Marcus hammered in another nail before responding. "The question isn't what you did, Bill. It's what you do from here." Bill nodded slowly. "I'm redesigning every cabin my company builds from now on, using your principles. And I'm putting your name on every blueprint as consulting engineer. You deserve the credit and the compensation." Marcus shook his head. "Keep your money. Just build them right. That's all I want." But Bill insisted. Over the next month, he not only credited Marcus on every project, but brought him clients from across Montana. People who had seen the news coverage and wanted cabins that could withstand anything nature threw at them. Marcus's phone rang constantly. Architecture firms from Denver and Seattle reached out. A building science journal requested a feature article. By late February, when the worst of winter finally broke, Pine Ridge had been rebuilt stronger than before. Not a single reconstructed home suffered damage in the subsequent storms. March brought the thaw. Snow began melting from the valley floor, revealing a landscape transformed not just by winter, but by the lessons it taught. Pine Ridge looked different now. Every rebuilt structure bore the mark of Marcus's engineering, steep roofs cutting dramatic angles against the sky. What had once looked absurd was now the new standard. The town council called a special meeting on the first Tuesday of March. Marcus arrived to find the community center packed beyond capacity. Families he had helped, contractors he had trained, and neighbors who had once laughed at him filled every seat. Bill Patterson stood at the podium, looking nervous. "Marcus Holloway, would you come up here, please?" Marcus walked through the crowd, confused. When he reached the front, the mayor stepped forward holding a plaque and an envelope. "Marcus, this community owes you more than we can ever repay." The mayor's voice carried across the room. You didn't just save homes. You saved families. You saved livelihoods. And you did it with grace and humility after we treated you terribly. The crowd erupted in applause. People stood. Some wiped tears from their eyes. We're naming the new community emergency shelter after you. The Marcus Holloway Resilience Center. Because you taught us what real resilience looks like. And this envelope contains something else. Every family whose home you helped rebuild contributed. It's not much, but it's heartfelt. Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $47,000 and a handwritten card signed by over 100 people. His hands trembled as he read the messages. Thank you for saving our home. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for showing us what integrity means. He looked up at the crowd, struggling to find words. When Sarah died, I came here to disappear, to hide from the world. But you all reminded me that we're not meant to live alone, even when we're hurting. This community challenged me, frustrated me, and ultimately showed me that redemption is always possible. Bill Patterson stepped forward and extended his hand. Marcus shook it firmly. I learned more from you in 2 months than in 20 years of building. Bill said loud enough for everyone to hear. You're not just a better engineer. You're a better man. The applause thundered again. But the most meaningful moment came after the ceremony, when families approached Marcus one by one. The Hendersons, who had 3 kids under 10. The Rodriguezes, who had lost everything. The elderly Mitchells, who thought they'd have to leave Pine Ridge forever. Each one thanked him. Each one had a story of how his generosity changed their lives. Marcus realized something profound. His tilted roof hadn't just been about surviving winter. It had been about building bridges between isolation and community, between mockery and respect, between loss and purpose. 18 months later, Pine Ridge had become something of a pilgrimage site for architects and engineers. The valley that once mocked innovation now showcased it. Universities brought students to study the transformed skyline. Building magazines featured the town in cover stories about climate-adaptive design. The tilted roofs that had seemed so ridiculous were now photographed, measured, and replicated across mountain communities throughout the Rockies. Marcus stood on his porch on a crisp September morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. His cabin looked exactly the same as it always had, but everything around it had changed. Down the valley, dozens of structures now shared that distinctive steep pitch. Each one a testament to what happens when stubbornness meets science, when mockery transforms into respect. Bill Patterson's company had tripled in size. He traveled across the western states now, consulting on cold climate construction, always bringing Marcus along as lead engineer. They had become unlikely friends, bound by that brutal winter and the humility it forced upon them both. The Resilience Center opened in July, a beautiful timber frame building with, naturally, a dramatically pitched roof. It served as both emergency shelter and community gathering space. Marcus taught free engineering workshops there twice a month, passing along knowledge to anyone willing to learn. He had started dating again too, a widow named Ellen who ran the local library. She had lost her husband 5 years earlier and understood grief the way only someone who has lived through it can. They took things slow, hiking the mountain trails, cooking dinners together, talking about Sarah and Ellen's late husband Tom without pain, only gratitude for the love they had known. Life had surprised Marcus. He came to Pine Ridge to hide from the world and found himself at the center of it. He built a cabin to survive alone and ended up teaching an entire community how to thrive together. On his workshop wall, he kept that old blog article, the one that had mocked his design. Below it, he pinned the news clipping from the storm coverage and a photo of the rebuilt valley. A reminder that the best response to doubt is not anger, but patience. Not revenge, but resilience. The tilted roof that everyone laughed at had become a symbol, not just of smart engineering, but of staying true to what you know is right even when the whole world calls you crazy. Sometimes being mocked is just the price of being ahead. Marcus smiled, finished his coffee, and headed inside. He had blueprints to draft for a new project in Wyoming. Winter was coming again, and this time, he wouldn't be preparing alone.